Alright, so this is going to be part 2 to what if Deku had Black Belt's powers. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
They took it to 10. Let me tell you how I come through with the 1-2, kicking shit like kung fu. Treat a bad bitch like she average. I'm a savage, little hoe, what you want do? I'm about cash if the raw fast. I'ma get that little nigga by any means.
Alright, so before we actually get started with this what if, I would like to give a shout out to the Infinite Dragon Sorcerer. If you like been paying attention to my channel, you know that he's one of the sins, and he's actually the sin of wrath. And I wanted to give him this shout out because he's really close to I think it was 500 subscribers, I believe, when I was at the time of recording this, right? So it might be different, but I think you guys should go and subscribe to him because he makes a lot of good content. And if you like a lot of Black Clover what ifs, he actually makes a lot of those. But he also does Deku what ifs as well. So if you really want more Black Clover what ifs, other than mine, because I know that not many people do Black Clover what ifs. So if you really like those kind of videos, then you could go check out his channel and subscribe, and tell him that I sent you. So with that being said, let's just actually get into the what if. Also, I'll have his link in the description. So yeah. So last time we just got done with the heroes versus villains kind of test. So right now we're gonna get into the USJ. So it'd be the day in where it'd be the beginning of the day, and Deku's walking to school. And as this is happening, he remembers what All Might said to him about One for All and how if he had anyone in mind. So he's thinking about this, and as he's thinking, he runs into these the media that's there in front of the school, and they're actually there for All Might. And Deku doesn't really want to be a part of this, so he just kind of walks by and doesn't really talk to the reporters. And this would make him seem like he's really arrogant in a way, to the media at least. But they would soon get their story from the other people, the other students that would come through. So they would just write off Deku as if he was no one really, even though he's so powerful. So we would get into the classroom, and this is when Aizawa would tell him that they're going to the USJ pretty soon. And that means that they're gonna go there to kind of learn about rescue type heroes and learn about different scenarios and how to be prepared for those kind of rescue type missions. So this is when Deku, or not, this would be later in the day when Deku would be going to lunch, right? And he's still thinking about who should give One for All to, right? Or give a recommendation to All Might. So I don't have a clear idea of on who wants to be who the audience wants to get One for All. There was a bunch of different ideas and not really that many clear ones. It was kind of spread out over a bunch of different characters. So you guys tell me who you want to get One for All in this. So this is when Deku they'll be eating lunch, and this is when the alarms at the school go off and people think that it's a villain, and everyone runs into this hallway and they get kind of stuck, right? Deku would see the media outside, but again he can't really speak up. So what he would do is that he would telepathically tell this information to Ida, which would get Odoraka to make him weightless, and he would go in front of everyone and tell that that it's just the media and to calm down, right? So later on, this is when they're getting ready to go to the USJ, and people are really praising Ida about what he just did, right? Getting everyone calm and collective. And he basically says no, it wasn't really my idea. I actually got the information from Deku, and I was basically his voice. And people would see Deku pretty they would see him in a heroic light or something to that effect. They would have admiration for him because he never really spoke up and like wanted that attention, right? So yeah, so everyone would get ready and getting their hero costumes on, and they would, Momo and Deku would basically get everyone lined up so they could go into the bus. And when they're on the bus, they actually have this conversation similar to what they have on in the anime, in where Suyu or Froppy actually tells them, or it has this like kind of discussion about how Deku, Todoroki, and Bakugo are the 3 strongest students in the class, and they want to know more about their quirks. So Deku would basically telepathically uses telepathy to tell Froppy that he can't really speak, because if he does, it'll create this large amount of quasi sonic energy that would basically destroy anything that's in front of him. So he uses his telepathy, and he's also able to control particles, their effects, I believe or the effects of particles, I believe, specifically with I think it's electrons. So yeah, or he could control their reactions, something to that effect. So she would relay this information to the rest of the class, and they'd be like, they'd be amazed that he was able to, go for so long without, speaking so much of a word. And Deku would tell Froppy his kind of life story about how when he was a baby, they kind of had to, he spent most of his childhood in a hospital until he was able to control his quirk, and now he doesn't even make noises when he sleeps. So people would really see Deku as a very determined person, not as a hero, but just generally as a person, because he had to overcome his strength, this amount of strength that he was born with, and he had to do it at such a young age. So by the time Todoroki and Bakugo are hearing this, and Bakugo is very angry given the fact that Deku's getting so much praise, and they're not really talking about him or Todoroki that much, other than the fact that Todoroki's Endeavor's son and things like that, and how he has 2 different elements. Or I don't think they know at this point that he has 2 elements yet. So this is when Aizawa would basically tell him to be quiet and that they're about to get to the USJ. They would get off the bus and they would open the doors, and this is when they would meet 13. And she would welcome them in to the USJ, and she would do that speech similar to what she does in the anime, describing about how quirks are meant to help people, but they could also be dangerous if you don't know how to control them or use them in the wrong scenario. And Deku kind of thinks this over, right? Because yes, he could really relate to this kind of fact about, because his power at a very young age was really uncontrollable. So he could really relate to what 13's saying. So they would continue their kind of tour. But before they could go any further, this is when, a giant gateway opens up. What the students see from this gateway are a bunch of villains that come out. In particular, they see this kind of bird-like creature with a bird head and a beak with an exposed brain that has a very muscular body build, or body type. So this turns out to be the Nomu, and right next to him is a man with a bunch of hands over him, and this is Shigaraki. And people are confused. They thought, I thought this was rescue, a rescue day and not heroes versus villains. And this is when Aizawa would basically say, this isn't a drill, everyone, 13 protect them and get him out of here. And he rushes to go and fight him. And this is when Kurogiri would block his kind of way. And I think at this point, he would teleport these students to different parts of the USJ. And I believe I kicked out the invisible girl in this one. I don't remember too much on that fact. So basically everyone would get teleported to different spots of the USJ, and Deku would be with Froppy and Mineta, and he would be in the water, and he would see a kind of villain going up to him and try to attack him. and Froppy would save him and get him onto the boat. So at this point, they're kind of on the boat and they don't know why they got there, but they determined that the villains don't know their quirks, so that's why they went to different like random spots. So Deku's like, alright, we could just he tells Froppy using his telepathy. So whenever Deku talks in this one, I'm going to say that he uses his telepathy, so I don't have to keep on saying it. So he tells Froppy that he could just fly them out of there. And she's like, oh, what about the villains? And he's like, don't worry, I got that. So as he's like, he would pick both Mineta and Froppy, right? He would do a flick just how he does in the anime, but it'd be a lot stronger since I'm pretty sure Black Bolt is like physical strength. When he like uses like when he absorbs energy into his body, his like strength is on par with the Hulk, so he'd be able to easily do a kind of shockwave enough to make that kind of whirlpool that the anime did. And Mineta would do the same thing where he throws like his sticky balls into the whirlpool. So they would get to shore and they would see Aizawa fighting everyone, and the Nomu, like, this is when the Nomu would come to like beat him up, right? And as they're kind of looking at this in kind of horror, that the Nomu was like basically massacring Aizawa because it's not much of a fight, this is when Shigaraki would come and try to disintegrate Froppy. What Deku would do is that he would use his like force field. If you don't know, he could do that. Black Bolt could do that. I explained it in like I think the first episode, the first part. This is the real part where he actually uses it. So he uses like force field to block it, and Shigaraki would be confused, like what? That's he would get really angry, and he would start scratching his neck. So Deku would try to go for a punch, and this is when the Nomu would block it, and Deku would be kind of confused, feeling that his punch didn't really do anything, even though he has like super strength. So he would try a couple different like hits, and it'd be kind of shock. The shock absorption would absorb most of the damage, and any damage that he would get regenerated pretty easily. And Deku's not really going all out in this part, or I would say he's going on like maybe. I'm not sure how the scaling would work against a Prime All Might and the Hulk, because there's a lot of different versions of the Hulk, so I don't know. So yeah. So Deku just decides to just use his voice, right? So he would basically look at the Nomu and be like, leave, right? And this whisper would just basically make this like wave of destruction that goes on for like hundreds of meters, right? And the Nomu would basically be nothing but goop at that point, similar to how I think it was one of the Super Scroll, I think what's called Black Bolt whispered in his ear and he became goop. That's kind of what's happening here, right? And I said in the last part that he kind of reabsorbs the energy into himself so that his whispers aren't as strong as they would be normally, just so that we don't have like these major destructions and he could actually use his voice more, or at least his whisper. That's what I mean, not like actually speak, because he can't absorb it to that point. So yeah, and Shigaraki would be like terrified, but at the same time very frustrated and angry, and he's throwing this kind of temper tantrum because his weapon that he was going to use against All Might is no longer there, right? And the reason why All Might is not in this, it's the same reason as in canon, right? Because he was going out saving people. So yeah. So Shigaraki would be viciously scratching his neck, right? And this is when the pros would come, and he's like, damn it, right? And this is when Snipe would shoot him and he would still get the injuries that he does in canon, and Kurogiri would basically take him and him alone out of the situation. So Deku would go he would get Froppy and Mineta to carry Aizawa to medical care, and then I don't think Aizawa would be as damaged as he was in the anime, but he would still be pretty damaged. So what Deku would do is that he would go around the nearest place to find where the villains are at, to kind of help any of the students that need or that are struggling, right? So I think the first one he would go to would be Momo, and Jiro, and Kaminari. And it'd be at the point where Kaminari is basically being held hostage and they can't do much. So this is when Deku would come, and being quick as he is, like he's like when he flies, it's like at 500 miles per hour. So he would rush in from behind and kind of knock out the villain pretty easily because he has superhuman strength. So it'd be a pretty easy fight there. And then Momo and Jiro would see this and see him as the hero of the situation, being able to save Kaminari. So Deku wouldn't say much at all, really, because he can't speak aloud. So this would kind of give off this kind of stoic kind of personality to Deku, as they're like looking at him, right? So after that was done, he would continue to go around and kind of defeat most of the villains there. So eventually, after all the heroes came, this is when all the heroes would be rounded up and the media would come to kind of check the situation. And I think in this one it'd be viewed a little bit more positively, because the students were able to kind of defend themselves, and Aizawa isn't as hurt as he was in anime. So yeah. So after the kind of like big fight was over, this is when Jiro would come to Deku after the fight and basically explain that she was very thankful for him, like saving them. And I think they would have this kind of connection because both of their kind of quirks have to do with sound in a particular way. So Deku would be like, oh, don't mention it, and things like that, right? So Deku, after this, would go home, and this is when his mom would basically tell him that she would have a talk with him, right? And she would basically explain that he is half inhuman, right? Because his father was inhuman and he's actually the king, and she said that pretty soon you're gonna be king also, right? After they pass the throne onto him, right? And Deku's kind of shocked, right? He knew he was kind of different from other people because of how his quirk worked, which isn't really a quirk, it's just the superhuman or the inhuman abilities that they get when they get exposed to kind of mist. So he's kind of sitting back and trying to take this all in, and his mother's like, yeah, I know it's a lot, but look, you're gonna be king one day of your people, right? And Deku doesn't really know how to process this, knowing that he's not what he thought he was. He's actually something completely different and more powerful than he thought. So I think I don't know when I could introduce the kind of cousins that Black Bolt has, but it should be kind of soon. So yeah, I'm gonna end it here, and then in the next part we'll go over the kind of sports festival and things like that, right?